Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. Knife of the Week, episode 14, number 14. So this is the Knife of the Week series where I go through the knives I used during this past week, tell you which one I found kind of came in handy the most, and proved as my Knife of the Week. As you'll notice on the table, we've got more than just knives, because I did a little bit more than just typical EDC stuff this past week. This is also the first video in my new work slash filming slash living location, so I've got a permanent setup again. I've got the ability to control my lighting, and I've got my outside of my video frame, so I hopefully keep things in the frame of the camera for you guys, so I'm not talking about something and holding it closer to myself, not recognizing the position on the frame. So as per last week's Knife of the Week, I mentioned I was done in the military and going into the woods for a few days or a week while I was kind of transitioning in between that military job and my new job going back into wildfire. So last Monday was my release date. Went and signed the paperwork I needed to sign, and then once I was all free and clear there, drove off to, well, did about 2 days worth of driving, we'll say, to get to my new work spot. So the idea was I wasn't going to have access to any kind of a normal living environment for that week. So I figured, what the heck, instead of like going and blowing every last available dime I have left on hotels for that week, figured what a better reason to go and practice my winter bushcraft and give myself that real good life experience of, I don't have a choice necessarily of having somewhere to go and warm up in. It gives me a little bit of that nomadic experience of what it would be like to not have a hub to go to. Now I've got friends in the area as well as the place I came from that have offered different things and kind of gave me those outs, but I pretty much told them all the same as my new employers when I met them. I want to be in a position where I have to actually learn this stuff through trial and error, because there is no better way that I learn than suffering and struggle. Now through wildfire, I've done a decent amount of bush camping throughout the last decade, and then with forestry kind of stuff, I've been around people with a lot more skills than myself, which is where I picked up a lot of these different things throughout the years. Then following guys like Mike Glover, Kevin Estella from Fieldcraft Survival, and going off of a lot of the different survival books and different things that I've heard of from those guys and different people throughout the years. Back a year and a half ago, November 2021, when I was still back on the east coast of Canada, in preparation for the military, I did a little overnight bush camp with like a 20K ruck on either end of that bush camping night. While I did have a pack full of gear with me in case something went wrong, it was November, it was giving rain, it was supposed to be close to freezing, but not that cold. And I basically gave myself about 3 hours to build a shelter from scratch with only the tools and things that I had on my person. So I used my Hogue axe here, and I used whatever couple knives I carried on me at that time. Went as far as digging the spruce roots out of the ground for cordage, and really tried to go with that whole how long would it take me to do this if I had to with minimal gear on me. Ended up getting pretty damn cold. My firecraft was the thing I learned is the most lacking of all my survival skills, because in extremely moist climates or inclement weather, it is so much harder than doing it in the summer. But you can watch that full video and see very warts and all my struggles as I go through learning a lot of this stuff firsthand. Done plenty of bush camping with the guys and gals at work, and then I've done a trip that we did for forestry school where 4 or 5 of us got together, put a shelter together. We learned really quickly flat roofs are a terrible idea. Dumb 18-year-olds finding things out the hard way. But then yeah, that solo trip was really the first time I ever went alone in the woods with no real backup, or like people had an idea where I was and I had remote location plans and contingencies in place, but I was trying to put myself in a little bit of that first uncomfortable position that people are more familiar with if they've done a lot of this solo bushcraft stuff. I spent plenty of time wandering around the woods when I was a kid, just alone with a pellet gun, that kind of thing, but I never really got into the woods the way that a lot of people around my home area did. So now that I'm out of the military, I'm going to channel a lot of my extra time into bushcraft and survivalist type of living and that kind of stuff in the woods. It seems like a very good place to spend my time. You could say the world's always been a mess and always will be a mess, but currently at this point in time, there's a lot of instability in the world, and I'm not sure, as I've said for quite a few years now, that I'm going to make it through my lifetime without some crazy shit happening in North America. We've had a very good isolated 70, 80 years from anything too bad, and I believe our time may be coming to a close. I hope not, and I hope everything turns around. I hope we can get ourselves squared away. But why would I sit around playing useless video games? Not that I don't still play some video games and mess around wasting time watching Netflix sometimes, but if I'm going to waste time doing a bunch of hobbies and interests that are just kind of give me dopamine kicks, why don't I do that, but also try and pick those interests that are going to come in most handy in the worst case scenarios. Same reason why in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu we train a lot off our back in the guard. You do not want to be there. It's probably one of the last places you want to be is on your back, but you got to know how to get up and out of there way better and way quicker, hopefully, than your opponent. The advantage is being the best and the most comfortable in the worst positions in the worst case scenarios, which is why I am, again, going to be channeling even more energy and time into this. And the Hard on Gear channel, you will see a lot more knifey, bushcrafty, wilderness stuff, I do believe, in the next few years. Okay, so really quickly, I will say that my employers hooked me up with my living space a little bit early. I ended up doing the first couple nights in the woods, one night in a tent, super cold. Second night, went and built a shelter, used a tarp, and tried to do like a very basic lean-to with like minimal resources, and then focused mostly on the fire because it was extremely cold. It was around like -10 most of that day, and then down to about -17, 18, I believe, that night. And I spent most of the time collecting firewood and learning how much more I need to work on, not just the starting of a fire, because the starting wasn't an issue. I used a lighter, by the way. I didn't mess around with the firecraft. It was cold as hell, so no ferro rod for me today. But the fire maintenance and making sure that I didn't consume too much wood, had enough wood kicking around, and just processing the firewood and collecting it in a way where I didn't have to spend every waking minute and basically get up multiple times throughout the night to wake up and get more firewood so I wouldn't freaking freeze to death. Tons of lessons learned. Watch tomorrow's video when that comes out, the Monday of, March 27th will be that video where I'll talk a little bit more about that experience and show you what I'm packing this time. Because I did only spend 2 nights in the woods, and I ended up getting comfortable in this new living location, plan on staying here for a night, and ended up staying here for, it's going to be 4 nights. Just basically having the first taste of total freedom with space to myself, unpacked my personal stuff into an actual permanent living space where I don't have to worry about getting tossed for inspections and all that. It's pretty damn cool. Super stoked about that. So anyways, I didn't hold up my end of the bargain as far as the staying out in the woods for this week, and I'm basically not too worried about it because I have learned so much from those 2 nights, and I'm going to be heading back out for a few more here shortly. Well, there's enough context for you, I'm sure, to have stopped watching by now, but if not, let's talk about the knives. The large Bowie that you see here, the K-Bar Large Heavy Bowie, is a discontinued model, but one of my first second fixed blade I really ever bought, and the first fixed blade that really changed my mind about the fact that a big ass knife could be used for a lot more than just a knife, because I didn't really realize until I started hacking away with trees and different things with this and learning the power of batoning with a heavy fixed blade, just how capable you can be with nothing but a very large fixed blade on your person. Oh, and hey there, viewers of the Hog channel. If you wouldn't mind, if you're enjoying this content, go ahead and click the like button, as it helps the channel out and gets this video out to more knife enthusiasts. And especially with something carbon steel like this, you can find the right type of rock, supposedly. Never done it myself, but you mess around looking for rocks and find something hard enough to use as flint. You have a carbon knife, you can create shelter, you can maybe find, at least fashion spears and different things to help get you food, maybe. More realistically, it'll help you cut branches and bushes, getting berries or whatever. Maybe provide food, shelter, water, you might have to get creative, but maybe that'll help you get water somehow. Maybe steal some water from somebody who's got it. Not recommending that. Just kidding, be good humans. Big knife. Super helpful, highly recommend it. However, sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome and not everyone's into super big knives. If you can only have one knife in a bushcraft scenario, pretty much always going to suggest a Scandi grind knife. I'm going to give the Mora Cansbull a try. I was trying out, I've got this, oh God, guys. I'll show you here in the overlay footage. There's now a drawer full of folding knives and a drawer full of fixed blades. I have organization, almost like I'm a real YouTube channel or something. So I'm going to reach into my fixed blade drawer here. Grab the Condor pterosaur, which is what I had out in the woods with me last week. I don't know why I had the Cansbull out, because that's next week's knife. But this kind of let me down a little bit. And I won't say let me down. I just did not like the edge geometry and the cutting performance like I do my other Scandi grind knives. It's pretty thick. The bevel behind the edge, I don't think is quite as thin. Well, the Cansbull's not a great example because it's pretty damn thin. But look at the amount of material still kind of on that almost convexly beveled Scandi grind versus the sharp decline and drop. I don't know if that comes through on camera or not on that Mora knife. And if I haul out the Garberg, which is the one I almost decided, and I'm still, God, because of the redundancies on this sheath, you've got the, I might actually be able to take this right off and slap it on my Cansbull sheath, I bet you. Actually, let me just see. Look at that. Maybe, folks, just maybe, that's what we're going to do. Look at that, problem solved. I'm going to bring the Cansbull with the Garberg sheath because that seems to work really well. And actually, I think it stays in there with a little girthier handle. Yeah, even better than the Garberg, because as the Garberg has worn in, it doesn't stay in quite as well. So I don't know if I trust it in this sheath without some kind of an overlap if I'm bouncing around. So I might have to consider getting a different sheath, or like maybe that leather overlap, or maybe something with the MOLLE clip, or even, well, I could figure something out with the MOLLE attachment I've got for this one. But this is still a great knife and one of my favorite bushcraft knives. I just need to fix this whole sheath situation, because the best knife in the world is only the best knife if it stays on your person. And if it falls out, you're kind of screwed, especially if it falls out and then you fall on top of it. Not great, not a good way to survive. I'll keep that aside for now because I think that's what we're gonna do. But like I said, this kind of disappointed. Rusted very quick because it is 1095 and it is uncoated. Now this unfinished acid wear, whatever, somebody help me here with better blade knife terminology for finish work, because this aesthetic stuff is the stuff I'm kind of bad at explaining or articulating. But I believe that's some kind of an acid wear, or just maybe the natural unfinished wash of the knife. But again, comment people. Help me below. Oh, have you noticed too that I've got a permanent stable structure here? There should be minimal shakeage of the camera because this is not attached to a shaky desk anymore. So all these problems that you guys have noticed in the comments, I appreciate you guys pointing them out, because sometimes I don't notice, but it definitely helps me prioritize what to fix. And the sooner I could get some of those problems done, the happier I was and the happier you will be. Quality of the stuff should come up. I'll work on the shadows and getting my lighting better over time, and I'll work on the editing and get all that quality up, because I believe that's the next step for the channel, is to increase the overall content quality. So these two fixed blades on me most of the time. The Azula 2 did come in handy for a lot of different things. So for food, the second night I was in there, I ended up just stopping by the grocery store on my way through town and picked up a pack of hot dogs and made a little weenie roaster stick with the Azula 2. Or I should say, at least I tried to, because like I've said before, this thing is just not the greatest knife for that sort of thing. It doesn't slice too well, and if you're trying to go and take off, like, say, limbs of a branch, it doesn't really have enough belly for you to really push through before it slides off that drop point. But that's, again, the only con I've really ever been able to pick out with the Azula 2. It's just not the sliciest knife, and it could use a little bit more blade. Eventually, I'll pick myself up an SE4. Maybe some of the different X-Can-Do and different knives are pretty tempting, and they have better blade profiles for bushcraft stuff, but the small package this thing comes in, it makes it just so awesome. Like many times, I did use this when I wanted to cut something that was against, say, like metal or a harder surface, and I didn't want to risk ruining anything else. So if I had to cut a zip tie or any kind of like a piece of paracord that was around something that was maybe not the most soft material, the Azula 2 comes in handy. No use this week for the Toray Anaconda. It stayed on my hip in that same 9 o'clock position, ready for any kind of weird backup scenario where it might have come into play. Didn't notice it, didn't really get in the way, sleep with it on my hip, or at least I did rather when I was in the woods those couple nights. Ended up being like minus 28 by I think 2 o'clock in the morning that night. That's Celsius, by the way, let me just say. So minus 28 Celsius, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but I think you're looking at somewhere's between minus 15 or minus 20. Cold as balls. I'm telling you, I was so impressed with my air mattress, which I did use. I'll show you in tomorrow's video if you are going to check that one out. It's going to have all my camping gear, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I used and what I tried and what I won't be bringing with me next time. But that inflatable X-Ped pad actually worked incredibly friggin' well. Didn't freeze, didn't crystallize to the point where the air mattress became compromised because the water crystals inside from my breath froze, which is an issue with like inflatable air mattresses. During the winter at least, obviously no problem in warmer weather. But I had a foam pad with me as well, and I'm really just trying to bring all the stuff I can with me. This really is an experimental phase. I'm using a lot more and carrying a lot more than I would while I do have my vehicle next to me here, and I'm finding out through this trial and error what is unnecessary to bring and what would be, say, more optimal for comfort and weight to space ratio, because I can only carry so much kit. And then once you're in the woods, if you have to tear down and move, the more stuff you have, the more time and the more effort and the more drying and the more risk you have of losing and tearing, and just it's a pain in the ass. So I'm going to work towards a more, not quite minimalist, but a more minimalist type of setup. Same goes for all the stuff on the table here, which I still haven't talked about everything, but really quickly then, just to finish this off and to explain why I won't be carrying certain things this week. Still carrying a decent amount though. Like I mentioned, the Condor kind of let me down, but I think if I sharpen it up better and maybe profile this down a little bit more, it'll take some time, but I think it'll be worth it, because this is a great knife, feels good in the hand. I do not like the lack of finger guard on a lot of these bushcraft knives, but that goes with the territory, gives you more room to work with and a little more ability to choke up and do a lot of the fine stuff you were going to be doing if you're carving and doing bushcraft and feather sticking and all that. The signal did get used just for the pliers, and the can opener actually, because I had a couple cans of like tomato soup in in the pack for to kind of balance out the nutrition of those hot dogs. So that was the can opener did get used, and that's been used plenty of times on fires for salmon and like Chef Boyardee stuff, like cans of ravioli over the fire. Always an easy little campfire snack that you don't need really any cookware for, just some kind of a spoon or a stick to eat it with afterwards. And something to open the can with, but you can pretty much figure that out with a knife. If you're, carrying something $10.95 and super awesome like the Azula 2, you could get pretty much anything open with that. Car doors as well. Shout out, you're my boy Blue on Instagram, who once had to pry himself into a car door with an Azula 2. Mannix 2 lightweight. So when the times came when this was not performing well on the bushcrafty type hot dog stick situation, just hauled out the Mannix 2 lightweight, see what would happen, and it did the job well. I knew it would because it's the same ergos as the regular Mannix 2, and it's actually really damn good for whittling or that kind of shaving bark, that kind of stuff. The BD1 steel held up pretty well. I touched this one up before I did the video. I realized as I was doing it, that I should have checked the sharpness to see how much it faded, but I hadn't really noticed any lowering in cutting performance. It was pretty consistently good throughout the time I was using it, and gotta say, not an ounce of rust or really any collected material. A little bit in the lanyard hole, just regular dust, but compared to what I've noticed with my triad lock knives when I've carried them, God, it's so nice just having them right there available when I want them. The triad locks, at least in my Recon 1 back in the day, can collect, when they're closed, debris, wood chips, dirt in this area here, and when you go to lock it, you'll get a little, maybe a little bit of a resistance to get the lock to fully close. And you have to shake it, and then it will close. I think that might be part of the reason why my Cold Steel Recon 1 does have a little bit of shake to it. The blade play around the pivot here, I don't think was due to, I threw this thing and batoned with it, so it could be due to a lot of things, but I feel like having the dirt work its way inside of the pivot and in between the triad lock really did assist the wear and tear over time, and probably sped up the decay of some of the, let's say, the quality, or reduce the quality of the knife over time more than it would have. But that's just something to think about. Triad lock knives are awesome. Everyone loves Cold Steel who's into, most people in this channel love Cold Steel because they are just one of the best bang for your buck hard use knife companies you're going to find. This is a super long knife of the week, by the way. I can tell already it's going to be like a 10 or 15 minute one, so thanks for sticking around. But let's get through the last couple of items on this table. The Silky Pocket Boy, suggested to me first, I believe, by Tyler Goodwin. Thanks for that, because this is the best folding saw that I have used. Now, to be fair, I've only used garbage ones before this. Let me see here. Oh, man. I shouldn't say the Fiskars one here is actually very good for the quality and the price. Relatively cheap and affordable little folding saw. It just doesn't cut quite as good as the teeth on this Silky. Just a little better quality. Of course, you'll notice I took the tip off, but I've done that with multiple saws. This is just your typical little $20 or $10 Coleman folding saw. Wouldn't recommend it. It is absolutely terrible. Compared to nothing, it's going to do you a world of good. If you're doing some kind of rough work around the yard, or like for wildfire, if you want to throw one of these in your backpack and buy another one after you're finished using it, you could probably get a lot of use out of a $10, $15 piece of gear like this, and not have to worry about resharpening it or not losing it or breaking it. However, if this is a survival tool for you, and this is something you're going to have in a survival pack, you are not going to be able to use this for very long. Weeks, months maybe, before you start to see some failure somewheres, at least with my experience of using these. So just as far as the scale of folding saws, Fiskars, as far as a cheap one, it was probably the one I would recommend the most. The action's fairly good on it. It's got this little push button lock on the back that seems to stay functional and work pretty well. But the Silkies, they make all kinds of different saws, by the way, in ranging from size. The Pocket Boy and the Big Boy and all the other boys and things that they have. But this one will fit into a jeans pocket, a cargo pant pocket of tactical pants. It might stick out at the end a little bit. It did come with a carrying case, which I managed to break pretty quickly on a fire export because, hard on gear. But the saw itself is incredibly good quality. And it is a little bit more expensive, but I do believe it is absolutely worth paying. I don't even think it's maybe $50, $60 Canadian, American, probably $40 in that range. Highly recommend these things. Now I have to go and clean this up a little bit, because as you do get cutting into some different like dead wood and stuff, you'll find the material collects in the grooves, and you'll get a little bit not a little bit, significantly worse cutting performance once these teeth start to jam up. Just giving a little tap, or maybe running your fingers the opposite direction with a pair of gloves if you want, just to pull some of that material out once it gets caught, kind of brings this thing back into full action. So the Glock shovel is missing a piece, which I got to go find. The saw at the top here, which I kind of forgot to try, is still intact. The pommel that screws on fell off. When I was using this to remove some of the snow from the area where I set my camp up, I noticed a while afterwards that there was something in the ground that looked like somebody left it maybe when they were trapping or hunting. I thought for quite a while about what the heck it could possibly be. I had no clue. I set it back down, so I'll deal with that later. Later on that night or the next morning, I think I realized this was gone, and I put two and two together. So I've got to go back and find that somewheres in my campsite, which is where I'm going tomorrow, Monday, when you watch the video for the weekly upload. There's a good chance I'll be back in the woods by then. As far as the performance of the shovel, super good. I've got to remember to keep the edge taped, because once I sharpen that up, I sliced through my bag here, slipping it in, just being stupid, not guarding my stupid blade. Anything that's sharp that's going to be unprotected should probably have some kind of a tape guard or anything like that around it. Something better, obviously, because you can see the tape does wear off. Last thing on the table is the Hogue EXT01. I am a little disappointed in the sheath and the let's say the overall maneuverability when having this on my hip and sitting down. So I did carry this before, but this time I kept it on my hip the entire time and tried not to let it come off my hip, with the idea of, will this become an issue when I'm getting up, sitting down, crawling around, doing different stuff? Turns out it did. And there were a few times where I found this thing off my hip, because this thing had went from the locked position up, and then I seen this sitting next to me. Maybe not a huge deal, but it would be if this was sitting like this and then I sat on it or whatever, caught my wrist on it, right? There's all kinds of terrible things that could happen. So I am going to commit to, after doing that last week's video on the Winkler Sciok R&D Hawk, the dangle with the elastic band is the way to go. So I'm gonna have to look at getting some custom kydex work done and try and get a really good sheath for this, because the overall performance was good. Once I get the attachment eventually and the hammer on the back of this, it'll give me another option. Plus the weight, I think, will be a little bit better. For the size and the weight of it, you can't expect much more from the cutting performance. It did its job well, and I got through some, especially the smaller firewood and smaller diameter trees. This dices up really well. When it came to the larger stuff and anything that required any amount of processing, I went to batoning with the K-Bar Large Heavy Bowie, or more so with the saw of the Silky here. Chainsaws are nice, and I'm sure like a full-sized, like a tri-fold saw, like a camp saw would be probably one thing to upgrade with, maybe. And I might look into that, because there were a few times throughout the night where I was just so sick of using this thing because of the amount of firewood I had to process. But without this, it would have been a million times harder. So knife of the week this week is not a knife. It's the Silky Pocket Boy, because this was the only way I think I would have possibly been able to keep up with the firewood demand. I could keep hauling up little dead sticks and take down small conifers, but I try to be careful selecting what I'm taking off the land, I guess, when I'm picking firewood or when I'm doing any kind of camping like this. I have a forest technician background, and I try and use silviculture knowledge and I guess theory when I'm picking certain trees and trying to, say, improve the stand, as well as using them for fuel and shelter and such. So without completely decimating the area around me, trying to select the appropriate trees, which, if it was survival, guys, we're not going to worry so much about like taking down the nicest tree in the woods if it means we're going to live another day. We have to take those moments when they come and make those decisions accordingly. Because I had contingencies in place and I knew I was at no real risk, even though I was super cold. Basically, I just spent like many hours of the night getting up, collecting firewood, and using this thing to drop some mostly dead trees that were a little bit smaller and not like sustaining huge pockets of like life and biodiversity. But yeah, seriously, I don't even know what my night would have looked like without this saw. So I'll explain this more in the next video, that tomorrow's camping video. But the old classic, what, X7? Yeah. Fisker's X7 hatchet, I think, is going to come with me instead of the Hogue. I'm going to try, as I mentioned in my first introduction video way back like over 2 years ago, that one of the things I want to do in this channel is make sure that you're not spending unnecessary amounts of money on gear when there's better, affordable budget options. Now, this is a $300-400 axe, depending on where you buy it, what country you're coming out of. This is something closer to maybe $40 or $50, $60. It's one of the best, say, mainstream companies as far as reliable composite material in the modern world that you can actually trust, as opposed to some of the cheap modern stuff, which is cheap crap that you wouldn't want to waste your money on, as opposed to a good wooden hand, like a hickory handled Swedish head, good axe that you'd pay a couple $100s for. Hollow handle, so you could do different things with that if you wanted to store some different stuff, tinder and whatever, and then put some kind of a plug in the bottom of that. Anything like that would probably change the weight and the dynamics of the handle. You can put a lanyard in here, or you could of course just leave it hollow and it stays nice and light with all of the weight very much at the head. Very thick head. You can see I've got some rust. This is some very nice carbon steel. This thing has been chipped and used and abused, but I'm going to take a bastard file to this and get this thing back to what I think is going to be a pretty damn good tool in the woods for my next few days of processing what I hope is a lot less firewood than what I had to do with this guy, because it's going to be a little bit warmer. I, without a doubt, had the worst couple of nights, and now it's getting a little bit closer to spring. The temperature is around 0 or +1 or 2 during the day, but where I am, I don't want to give you my latitude to location. I don't even know my latitude, to be honest. I'm getting to the point where there's not a whole lot of roads in the province I'm at that are much more north, and you're starting to get into like fly and native communities and stuff. Our fire district goes right up to like the Arctic in the summers, so yeah, definitely still in a place where if you are not capable of staying warm at night, you're probably going to die if you're outside. Even up to the summers sometimes, the mornings aren't going to be all that warm when you get this latitude. Something else that I did have on me but didn't use last week is the K.O.T.W Chance and Hell Bolo. I may put the K-Bar Large Heavy Bowie down this week and carry this instead. So I think the carry for this next little week's excursion is going to look a little bit more like... I think keeping, let's see here. Maybe we'll do something different. We'll get back to that in a minute. Silky. Yeah. A little bit less fancy and tactical, a little bit more of the old school, sort of classic kind of camp gear, you know, machete, axe, bushcraft knives. And yeah, I think this is pretty close to what you'll see me carry this week for knives and gear. Hey, like this video if you liked it, and feel free to check out my other knife of the week videos to see the progression of my EDC and the things I use throughout time. You can check out tomorrow's video on the camping update and all that stuff, and feel fring to go check out that last camping trip I did a year and a half ago where I really learned how to, I learned how much I suck and how much I need to work on this stuff more. So kudos to you folks who've been doing this for a long time and have all your tricks and favorite gear and equipment. Let me know down in the comments what you prefer to use out of all these kinds of machetes, axes, knives. What is your go-to bushcraft knives? What's your go-to stuff for collecting firewood? And again, I'll appreciate any comments you have watching my tomorrow's video or any of the other updates I do on this bushcraft stuff as I continue to get less stupid and be able to share that experience with you. So check the side panel for a new Hard on Gear video that you might not have seen yet, and we'll see you on that one or one of the next ones. Hard on Gear channel, signing off.